Welcome, everyone, to this episode of Productive Environment Podcast. Let me pause our funky music there. I am Andrea Anderson, CEO of Productive Environment Institute, and I am in Carolina Beach, North Carolina, joined by...
And I'm Barbara Hemphill. I'm in Raleigh, North Carolina, and I'm founder of Productive Environment Institute.
And you guys can see Barbara on the big screen here in front of us. And today, a lot of times on our PEPTalk Productive Environment podcast, we talk about organization and systems and tips and things for you to do. And then we also interview people. Today's main event is Barbara Hemphill. So I'm so excited, Barbara, to have this conversation with you. Let me go ahead and remove that and bring us up. So you and I have amazing conversations all the time. And in fact, that's how this podcast got started, because we would have these great conversations. We're like, oh my gosh, we need to share that with everybody. And let's talk about it. And so we had been in discussion recently about consultants and becoming a productivity consultant, an organizing consultant. We call them specialists in our business. They're certified productive environment specialists. And so we decided to do a series called the Consultant Collection. And we are going to be doing these 4 to 5 different pep talks about as part of the Consultant Collection. Okay. So if you're here for, how to get organized and things like that, go watch some of our other videos. We have several wonderful videos for you to choose from. But if you are thinking about potentially becoming an organizing consultant, or you are one and you want to, see what else is out there for you, then this series is for you. And if you're just not sure, and maybe you came for organizing help, but then you're thinking, I might want to help other people too. So then certainly stick around. So,
and I just have to interject something here. I got a call, a couple of weeks ago from someone who told me she was an elementary teacher. I think it was an elementary school teacher. She said, I never, ever thought about being a consultant. And we had a random conversation somewhere. I don't even remember where it was. And she said, you talked to me about how I could become a consultant. And she has been a consultant to businesses now for, I think, 14 years or something. So, a lot of people just think, oh, I could never do that. But with what we teach, literally anybody could do it, because we're training you to do if it's something that you want to do. So welcome.
Yeah. So, and it's interesting, different people have come into our world from different directions. And next week, I'll actually be telling how, you were years ahead of me and how I found you, and you'll hear my story. Yours is very unique in that there wasn't even an organizing industry yet. It didn't even exist. So a lot of time, when I say people come into our world from different places, a lot of times people come through our programs. They might go through our office transformation boot camp or our digital transformation boot camp, and they say, wow, this is amazing. I would like to, know how to do this or teach other people to do it. So that's a way in for people now that didn't exist even when I, was coming up. But for you, I was thinking about this, Barbara. The climate was different. The world was different. There was no organizing industry. And I want to hear you talk about that. But I was thinking about it, that what is the same, I think, today as it was 46 years ago when you started, is the reason you started your own business. And I would love for you to start there and just tell us all about it.
Okay, well, I love to tell this story because I think my story can be anybody else's story too. And we've proven that. We have people that have done that. So my first husband and I lived in India for almost 5 years. We adopted 3 orphan children, 2, 3, and 4, one with special needs. We moved back to New York City. And my husband worked for a nonprofit, and the income was not enough for living expenses in New York. So I needed to bring in income, but I wanted my children to be first. And I decided the only way that could happen would be if I somehow figured out a way that I could do something. So I thought, if I can find a problem in the world that I can solve, that people will pay me for, then I can do it on my own time. And I grew up on a farm in Nebraska, and I used to follow my daddy around. So I was pretty handy. I could do small electrical repairs or plumbing repairs. And we lived in a complex of 5 high rises. And often I would hear people talking about problems. I thought, okay, I could do some kind of a handy girl service or something. But in New York, you have to be a member of the union to do that. It's like, okay, that's not going to happen. So I thought, okay, I'm just going to listen. So I literally went to the playground and with my kids, and I would just sit and listen to what people were complaining about. And over time, I began to hear about disorganization, about clutter, about it's tax time and I haven't filed my receipts, and just, the clutter in my kids' room, or fighting with my spouse about clutter or whatever. And I thought about it, and I thought, I was blessed. I'm not naturally organized. People who've been around me know that I was diagnosed a long time ago with ADHD, and all the systems we've created were created for me. But I was blessed that I grew up on a farm. My father was a farmer. So when you're a farmer, you have to be organized. If you're not, and he was a dairy farmer. So, if you're not organized, there's not going to be any crops and there's not going to be any milk. And my mother was the personal assistant to the president of a bank for 46 years. So, and even though I grew up in the second floor of a tenant farmhouse, when I was young, there was not even any running water there. But we did things in systems. I mean, I can hear my mother saying, if you're going upstairs, take something with you. And we weren't allowed to work on Sunday. But one of the things my mother taught me to do on Sunday afternoon was to write thank you notes. And it's like, wow, that serves me very well to this day. So systems were just a way I grew up. And I would go with my children to other people's homes. And I was like, wow, they just had no clue. And there was clutter everywhere and stuff. And so I took $7 out of the grocery money, which was a big deal because I literally used to walk 20 blocks because I didn't have 50 cents to the bus. And I saved the $7. There was a newspaper. Remember, there was no social media. There was nothing like that. I didn't have a cell phone. There was a newspaper called Wisdom's Child, and it was one of the freebies that would be like in the lobbies of apartment buildings and things like that. And the ad said, disorganized, I organize kitchens, files, closets, you name it, call Barbara Hemphill. And there was a phone number, and get this, it was a 7-digit phone number because we weren't even using area codes at that point.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. And your rate, what was your rate? Tell them your rate.
$10 an hour. And I lived in horror that someone would ask me what made me think I was worth $10 an hour. My first 2 calls, maybe 3, I don't even remember for sure, were crank calls from guys trying to pick me up. The first time this guy told me he had this library, he had all these books and all this kind of stuff. And he says, when can you come? And so I got my calendar out and I said, well, let's see, I would be available at Tuesday at such and such. He said, oh, I meant tonight. And when he said that, I knew exactly what was going on. So that happened a couple of times. And then the third call was from a woman, 55 years old, whose husband was an attorney. And he had died very suddenly and left piles of paper everywhere. He was a solo practitioner. So he had papers at home in his home office, and then he had papers in the office. And she didn't have any children. So in many ways, I did what a daughter might have done. She was clueless, absolutely clueless about anything that was related to what he was doing. So I said that I would come over, and I went over. She did not know she was my first client. And when I looked around, I thought, oh, what in the world have I done? And then I just thought, okay, do what you know to do. And I started sorting. I just picked up the pieces of paper and started putting them in piles. This is for the attorney, and this is insurance, and this is whatever. And that's how it all started. And to promote it, I didn't even have a business card because I didn't have money to get a business card, but I would find parent-teacher associations or garden clubs or church groups where I could give a speech on 10 ways to organize your kitchen or 10 ways to organize your kids or 10 ways to do whatever. And then I would say, oh, by the way, if you want help. And we'd done just a few of those. I had maybe 4 or 5 jobs at the most, not very many. And we transferred to Washington, D.C. And I called the Washingtonian magazine, which was the top business, well, not even a business magazine, a cultural magazine, I guess you'd say. And it had a thing called Best Buys, where it would show pictures of something and then say, and it showed my picture sitting on a file cabinet, and it said for $10 an hour, you could get Barbara Hemphill to come and organize your filing system. And that was kind of how it started. Now, you would think that you get tons of work from that, but I didn't, because you find out that PR doesn't always work that way, but it gives you credibility. And I would continue to speak. But I called the Small Business Administration and said, I've moved here. Oh, I have to say, the reason that I got the job from the article in the Washingtonian was I said, I've moved here from New York City and I have a service which I think would be of interest to your readers. Fortunately, thank you, God, nobody said, how long have you been in business or how many clients have you had? Nobody ever asked me that question. But then I went to the Small Business Administration to ask them to help me start. And they absolutely laughed and said, nobody pays for organizing closets and cupboards. I just thought it was crazy. You better find something else to do. And they gave me some suggestions, but I just didn't believe them. So that's when I started looking for these. I would talk to people on the program and say, do you belong to any organization that hires speakers or that needs speakers? Because I wasn't getting paid for it. So I did a bunch of free speeches like that. And then one woman said to me, I work for a real estate agent. Would you come and organize me? So I organized her home. Then I organized her car, because for a real estate agent, your car is your office. And then she asked me if I would come to the office. And it was the first office I'd ever been to. And I said, I don't know if I can do it, but I will come. And if I can do it, you can pay me. And if not, I'll just walk away. Well, I got there and I realized the principles were the same. I mean, a filing system is a filing system. A storage room is a closet. I mean, it's the same thing. And then she said, would you speak to the Northern Virginia Board of Realtors? And I said, well, how many people is it? And she said, oh, it's about 500. And she said, how much would you charge? And nobody had ever said that before. And I said, $500. And she's okay. It's like, what is this? So then I began to realize that speaking was, a really good thing. And I was trained as a musician, which is performance. So I really took my training from music performance into that. And that's really how it started. Now, the interesting thing is with the Small Business Administration, I think the statistic I saw last is that residential organizing alone is now like an $11.8 billion industry. And post-COVID, we're just seeing the opportunities in the business world. We've seen a lot with solo practitioners who work out of their homes. And during COVID, we were very blessed because we knew how to do organizing offices virtually. And so people were moving home to their offices. So we were able to help them virtually, which is a huge blessing. And that's thanks to Andrea, because when Andrea joined the program, I was doing it all in person. And she was the one that said, let's do this. We didn't even use the term virtually then. We used it by, I don't know, we did it by phone. There was nothing except a telephone. I thought she was crazy. I thought this was absolutely crazy, because this is about, and it worked perfectly. So thank you, Andrea, for taking me into the next generation. Then what I found very quickly was that the number one organizing problem in homes was paper. We could do the closets, the cupboards, the garages, and all that. But everybody, in those days, everybody had paper, and lots of it. And people who are over 50 probably remember we used to get canceled checks wrapped up in bank statements in envelopes, big, thick envelopes, which people kept under their bed and in the closets and in the garages because they had numbers on them and the IRS might want them. They never looked at them. And so they would ask me, how long do you keep bank statements? How long do you keep credit card receipts? How long do you keep insurance policies? I didn't have a clue, but I thought, well, there must be a book in the library. So I went to the library to find a book, and there wasn't one. There was only one book called File, Don't Pile, which was incredibly complicated. I mean, just an unbelievable. It was actually a numerical system based on the Dewey Decimal System. It was really crazy. And I realized there wasn't a book on that. So I basically just said, I'm going to research the answers about how long you keep things. And so the first book, Taming the Paper Tiger, was written in 1988, and it addressed every single piece of paper that came into the household. Today, that book exists. It's called Organizing Paper at Home, What to Toss and How to Find the Rest. And it addressed everything from back in those days, recipes and coupons. We did all those coupon clipping things and artwork and photographs and insurance policies and medical records and tax records and real estate records. And it didn't and doesn't say this is how long you should keep it, because it doesn't really have, it's not a science. And if you ask multiple accountants or multiple lawyers, you would get different answers. So it really is about having a system that you implement. And in Productive Environment Institute, we use the acronym for system of saving you space, time, energy, and money. And so it was about, with the IRS, if you had a system and you could prove that you were implementing it, they would be much more gracious to you than if you put things in a plastic bag or a shoebox and handed it to them. So in the book, I asked the question, I gave guidelines. I said, this is what I would do. And I gave a file index list and things like that. But it was really designed to be a reference book, not a book that you read from cover to cover, but a book that you could look up in the table of contents and say, what do I do with business cards? And what do I do with, how long do I need to keep tax rate? Or what do I keep in my safety deposit box? Is another one of those big issues. So that's how Taming the Paper Tiger came about. And then jump forward, we began to move into the digital age. And so well, back up a little bit. I worked with another company, and we developed what we called the finding system as opposed to a filing system, which is our proprietary way of organizing paper. And even though this has been promoted as the paperless age, our experience is that there are very few individuals, virtually none over the age of 50, but even younger than that. And actually what's interesting is I'm seeing is now there are even younger people who are recognizing that they really like to use paper, but they felt badly about it. It's like, oh, that makes me old fashioned. But now we're beginning to see that there are paper, and there's many industries that still have lots of paper, and all businesses, even the ones that have gone digital, have all the paper that they created before they went digital. And most of them have not done anything about that. So we developed this proprietary, what we call finding system. But then we began to get into digital. And so people didn't want to deal with their paper because they say, oh, well, paper's going to go away and I'm not going to have to deal with it. I'll just deal with digital. Well, here's what happened. With digital, we just have a bigger, faster, hidden mess, because the 4 words that have kept this business going over 4 decades, I learned from clothes closets. Clutter is postponed decisions. Now, interestingly, if you Google it, you'll see that many people quote it, but they often add an adverb in it. Clutter is merely postponed, or only postponed, or simply postponed. And it hurts my heart when I see that, because the reason people hire us specialists to help them is because they're having trouble making decisions. So if someone says to them, Clutter is just postponed decisions. Then it's like they already feel guilty enough and they already have enough shame. And now you're saying it's not that big a deal. It is a big deal. Because the book that I wrote in 2014 was Less Clutter, More Life. And the premise is that physical and digital clutter is a symptom of emotional and spiritual clutter. And the issue about organizing has to do with, number one, believing that you can do it. If you don't believe you can do it, that's true. I remember going to the Epcot Center years ago and seeing the quote up there at Disney World. It says, if you can see it, you can do it. And that's the way we help people see that they really can do it. And then we help people, we moved into digital. So then we renamed the company Productive Environments. It had several names during Paper Tiger Institute and a whole bunch of different names. But clutter is postponed decisions has always been the core. And it doesn't matter what it is that you're deciding about. And our job is not to make the decision for you. In fact, there is an industry now of thousands of organizing consultants. And many of them, we come in afterwards. So one of the saddest stories I heard was where a colleague of mine, a friend, was always complaining about her clutter. And she knew what I did. And she'd say, oh, you just die if you saw my office. And I said, well, people say that all the time. No, I'm not going to die. It's your office, and if you don't care, I don't care. But she wanted to do it. And so she was transferring to a new job. So I thought, I'm going to gift her 4 hours of my time to organize her office so that she'll be ready for her new job. She refused my offer. And I thought, what is this about? So I kept kind of talking to her and I said, I really don't understand why you're not going to take my gift of 4 hours. And she said, I hired 3 organizers in 2 states and paid over $10,000, and I'm worse off now than I was before. And she said, and besides, I don't want you to come into my office. Well, this is before we did virtual organizing. So I said, oh, you don't have to. I said, just put all your papers in a garbage bag or boxes or whatever and bring them to my office. So that's exactly what she did. And at the end of 2 hours, she was elated, so excited. And I said, I have a question. Can you tell me what is different about what we're doing here than when you did with the other organizers? And she said 2 things. One is, I never realized before that my papers were postponed decisions. And secondly, you didn't tell me what I should do. You asked me what I was willing to do. And our tagline is accomplish your work and enjoy your life. We are facilitators and we hold you accountable. So if you believe you can do it, you have a system that you can implement and you have accountability. Anybody can do it. I've never met anybody in all the years I've been doing this who wasn't able. Does that mean you're going to be, there's so many myths in organizing. People say, oh, I know what you teach. Handle a piece of paper only once. No, I don't teach that. I teach exactly the opposite of that. Or a place for everything and everything in its place. No, I don't teach that. I teach the opposite of that as well. Because both of those are the things that gave us shame and guilt over the fact that we weren't able to do it. So it really is a matter. Organizing is an art. And it has to be done to match your style. And organizing in and of itself has no value at all. In fact, you may know someone who spends all their time getting organized and has nothing to do to show for it. Organizing is about enabling you to be and do all that God created you for.
Amen. Full stop. Period. I love it. A couple of things I picked up on as you were talking, Barbara, I want to comment on. It's just so funny. I'm going down memory lane with you. You always told the story of the 55-year-old widow, and I met you when I was 35. So I was just doing the math. And so I was like, okay. And I remember hearing you tell that story. Like you told the story, one of your first people you ever worked with, 55-year-old widow. And I just pictured this old woman with, gray hair up in a bun and the little teacher glasses, and I'm like, I'll be 55 this year. So I'm like, wait a minute. She wasn't a little lady after all. So my whole image of that story has changed.
Oh, that's funny.
Okay. And then the other thing I was thinking about the money, you were charged $10 an hour, which now is like only $10 an hour. But at that time, I mean, the minimum wage was what? $3 to,
I don't know. I really don't. It's a number
really,
thing, but I don't remember numbers. But I mean, $10 was a lot.
a lot. That's what I was thinking. And then you
I
said,
remember the first client I had in Washington, D.C., I was scared. Okay, so this is transparency. I worked for lots and lots and lots of hours. Oh, and I think by then I had raised the fee. It was $35 for the first hour and $10 for each additional hour because I wanted people to hire me for longer hours. And I didn't send an invoice for quite a while because I was scared to. I really was terrified to send an invoice. And the invoice got to be over $1,000 and I hadn't sent it yet. And I just thought and she paid it.
You finally said it and she paid it.
I said it and she paid it. I was like, wow, this is really, really eye-opening.
And that brings, you just brought up another point too about the money side of things. So what's so interesting, I had a conversation with our team last week about this, if we do this long program and it's this much money, but now we're saying we're going to do this really short program, but it costs more. They're like, that doesn't make sense. And I'm like, if you can solve somebody's problem faster and better, then they're willing to pay more for that.
Because what you are giving them, in fact, we used to offer a service that we called an 8-hour miracle. And it was literally, we would go to someone's office, we would sit there with them in their office and organize it. And we called it, we promised 3 things. We still offer the same service. We have a different name for it. It's Total Office Transformation. But we promised 3 things. One was they would know what to do with every new piece of paper that came in. 2, that everything we had filed in the 8 hours, they or anyone else that they wanted to could find it in 5 seconds or less. And 3, that we would leave them with a game plan for how they could deal with sometimes decades worth of paper. And if we didn't do that, they didn't owe us any money. I did hundreds of those that way. And what was so interesting was that they were just astounded that would work. And periodically we would be in the middle of it, like 3 hours in or something like that. And they say, oh, this is a miracle. Yeah, I mean, and I say, yeah, that's what it is. But what would happen now sometimes, and my husband used to say, sometimes your 8-hour miracles are 12 hours, because sometimes I'd get there and we weren't quite done and I wasn't ready and I wanted it. So I'd stay longer. But there were other times when people were quick decision makers. And that's what makes a whole lot of difference. How quickly does it take you? How long do you take to make decisions? They would be quick and they would get so excited and they would realize that they could practice what we call the art of wastebasketry, and they'd start throwing things away. And 5 hours, 6 hours would be done and we're done. Yeah. And it's like, you just have 2 or 3 more free hours. And what is it that people want more than anything else? It's time. Time to do more work, time to play more, time to sleep more, time to dream more. And that's what organizing and productivity, and that's what our certified productive and specialists do, is they give people time to accomplish their work and enjoy their lives.
That's right. That's exactly right. And that's why most of our specialists do not charge by the hour, because I'm speaking to the clients, are not paying for their time. You're paying for a solution that Barbara created literally over the last 46 years that can happen very quickly. We still do offer a service where it can be done in one day. We now also offer virtual where it's over time, and we teach you how to do it. In another program in our boot camps, we actually teach you how to do it yourself in a different setting. So we have all these different modalities. And if you are an organizing consultant or want to be, and this is resonating with you, we want to invite you to watch our webinar. We have a 40-minute automated webinar. You can go watch it right now if you watch this video. It is at becomeaspecialist.com. Check that out. And there's a little contact button on that page too. So if you've already seen it or you have a question, you can just click that contact button and get in touch. I'm not finished yet. I want to go over a couple more things. Kathy looked up the minimum wage. Thank you, Kathy. U.S. federal minimum wage in 1978 was $2.65 an hour. And you were charging $10 an hour, Barbara.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. Wow. Thank you, Kathy. Kathy's one of our certified productive environment specialists as well. So a couple other things I was thinking about. In 1988, you published Taming the Paper Tiger, your first Taming the Paper Tiger book. And I was graduating high school at that time in 1988. And then I met you 17 years after that. So I'm just like going through your timeline. And I also realized that your Less Clutter, More Life book, this is the 10th year anniversary. I didn't even realize that until you said.
I hadn't thought about it either, but
2014. I'm like, wait a minute, that was 10 years ago. So anyway, yeah. So we just have the most fun with our specialists. We have got an incredible team of specialists, and I can't wait to tell you my story about that next week, but about how I met Barbara and helped create this team. But just talking to our team of specialists, they are coming from many different directions. Some were like me, where they worked a job and they were the one that was always the organized one and organizing everybody else and keeping things in order. Some, were in the corporate world and they were leading teams. Others, had raised their children, and so they had to be relatively organized to raise their children, especially those that have multiple children. And so they're now saying, okay, all my kids are grown now. I want to do my own thing. I want to have my own business. And so they come in and they're hearing about this. And so they're saying, wow, this is something that I can do. So that's why we kind of created the consultant collection to talk to you guys. So whatever camp you fit in there, if this is something of interest to you, we are starting a new cohort of certified productive environment specialists soon. So get in touch. Go watch that webinar, becomeaspecialist.com. Click the contact button. I think at the end of the webinar, you'll be invited to book a call. So make sure you do that so we can jump on the phone. This isn't something that you can sign up for on the webinar. We need to have a conversation. We need to make sure you're a good fit for us and that we're a good fit for you. So we invite that conversation. And for those of you that stayed on to the end and you don't want to be an organizer, but you just love Barbara and you wanted to hear her story, you can also go sign up for our other webinar. So go to productiveenvironment.com/webinar. And that is called Less Clutter, More Life. So you can sign up for that webinar. And that is a live one actually coming up soon. So I'm not going to say the date because depending on when you watch this video, go to that site and you'll find out what date we're meeting. So yeah, Barbara, this was great. I love hearing your story. There's so much more. And I invite everybody that's watched this today to go back and watch some of our previous pep talks, because you'll hear different stories of Barbara's through the years that have all led up to where we are today. So that's all I have to share. Barbara, any closing thoughts as we end today's pep talk?
Well, I just have to say it took everything I could muster to restrain from interrupting you, because every time you say something, it's like, oh, that reminds me of this story, and that reminds me of this story.
I know.
So I get an A in restraint today.
We could stay on. We should do a marathon all day live stream one day. Maybe we'll do that. That would be fun.
Well, the funny thing is, I'll have a conversation. It happens all the time. I'll have a conversation with somebody and it will trigger a story that I literally have not thought about in like 30 years. And I'll remember, oh yes, I remember when that will happen. And so it's very exciting. I think the thing about being an entrepreneur, and I'm such a passion for my license plate, says Hope Fool. And when people ask me why, I say, because I'm a fool for Jesus. And HOPE stands for Help Others Pursue Entrepreneurship. And our country and our world is in a horrible situation right now. And entrepreneurs are the people who bring solutions to individuals and to companies. So I've never been more excited about what I'm doing. People saying, what are you going to retire? I'm not retiring, I'm refiring. And I would love to have you consider joining us.
I love it. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Please comment if you're watching us on YouTube, or if you aren't watching us on YouTube, please go over there and like this video and subscribe to our channel. That helps us spread the message. So thank you all. We appreciate you, and we'll see you next time.